All right. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Vox Populi's Legislative Roundtable. I'm your host, Norine Dworkin, Editor-in-Chief of Vox Populi. Joining me today are West Orange County lawmakers, State Senator Geraldine Thompson of District 15 and State Representative LaVon Bracy Davis of House District 40. State Representative Bruce Anton is supposed to join us from House District 41. If he does, he will just jump into the conversation and we will catch him up. And monitoring the chat today is Vox Populi's very own Catherine Brzezinski. She is a Vox Populi contributing reporter, and we are very happy to have her here. All right. As we mentioned earlier, if you do have questions, please put them in the chat and we will get to as many of them as possible at the end. So first, thank you so much for taking the time to be here today. We're very excited to have you with us. Now, the legislative session starts January 9th. I know that you have been in committee meetings and you have been busy filing bills. I want to talk to you about those. So let's talk about some of the bills that you've been working on this session. Senator Thompson, I want to start with you. Let me see if I can unmute you. Oh my goodness, I've muted you and now I need to unmute you. You may have to do that yourself. There's
I just unmuted.
There you go. Okay, so sorry about that. So one bill that you and I have we've talked about before, and I know that this one is very important to you. It has to do with children being left in cars, and given the summer that we've all just come through, this is particularly relevant. So please tell me about the legislation that you're working on.
Well, this bill would require a sensor that would be synced with a cell phone, a smartphone, and the sensor would be attached to the car seat. The state of Florida requires car seats for children up to 6 years old. And so since that's already in place, this would be another means of making sure that children are not inadvertently left in cars. We had a situation in Orange County where a father was asked to take his child to the daycare center. He normally did not do that. It was his wife's responsibility. And so he was on autopilot and just drove to work with the baby in the back of the car, facing backward in the car seat, asleep. And when he came out at the end of the workday, the baby was dead. So that is preventable. And we want to give everybody as much help as we can so that children are not injured. This is a problem that is increasing, and the bill relates to vehicular pediatric heat stroke. That's the name of it. And so it addresses the temperatures, how they rise in cars because of the glass and how hot it can get here in Florida.
And doesn't even
everyone would be required to get this sensor. And the way that it would work is if you turn the ignition off and you walk away from the car for, let's say, no more than a minute, your smartphone would alarm because the weight did not decrease as it would have had the baby been removed. So that is one of the high priority bills that I'm going to work on with Representative LaVon Bracy Davis for the upcoming session that, as you said, begins January 9th.
That's great. It doesn't even need to be that hot outside for this to be a very dangerous situation. It could even be in the 70s, isn't that right?
Absolutely. And people who think that they can crack the window and make it a more comfortable situation are very wrong. And in addition to requiring the sensor, we want to require a public education campaign to educate people regarding how dangerous it is to leave children in the car.
How would that public education campaign work? Where would that be pushed out to?
It would be pushed out of the Department of Highway Safety and Motor Vehicles, and they would have a I guess a person in their communications team who would lead this. And sometimes these agencies also contract with other entities to manage the public relations campaign.
Okay, all right, this sounds really good. All right, I'm going to move to Representative Bracy Davis. Scholarship bill. I know that this is super important to you, and I'm going to read the title of this bill because I want to make sure that I get it right. It's the 1920 Ocoee Election Day Riots, Loans, and Scholarship Bill. And this builds off of the work that your brother, former Senator Randolph Bracy, did. So this was the very first bill that you filed, and this kind of builds on what you tried to do last year. So give us some background on this bill and tell us how this is different from what was done last year.
Sure. First of all, if you don't mind, let me just say thank you for this opportunity, the opportunity to speak and to see you. I'm so appreciative of you, Norine. I think since I've even been on the campaign trail, I can say at every major event in my district, you were there reporting, as you would say, an alternative voice for the community. So I'm just grateful for you, and even just this opportunity to speak to you and constituents and people that are interested in what's going on in our districts and our city and our county. So thank you for doing this work. Sometimes I think it goes so unsung. And with that, I am a resident of Ocoee, Florida. My husband and I have been a part of Ocoee probably for the last 6 or 7 years. And it was when I moved to Ocoee that I learned of its somewhat rich but sad history. I'm sure that a number of your viewers understand the Ocoee massacre that happened in 1920. If you don't, please look it up or have a private conversation with our historian, Senator Geraldine Thompson. She can give you all the information that you would need to know about the Ocoee massacre in 1920 and one of the bloodiest days in American political history. So with that, as you mentioned, my brother at the time, Senator Randolph Bracy, really also was a resident of Ocoee, really had a passion of doing something in the form of reparations for students. He was able to get a piece of legislation passed that would allow for students to get scholarships. They could either be descendants of the Ocoee massacre or just African-American residents who are from and live in Ocoee. When I learned that a number of students had concerns with this because how the statute is written, you have to go to a public school in Florida, which Florida has some great public schools, but it kind of X'd out 75% of all the historically Black colleges and universities in the state of Florida. We know that Florida only has one public HBCU, which is FAMU, a great school. I happen to be an alumni. I graduated from FAMU College of Law. So no slight to FAMU College, no slight to FAMU at all. However, we figured there was room to grow and room to kind of expand this piece of legislation further so that we can include our HBCUs. And so we know that there's Edward Waters in Jacksonville, there's Florida Memorial, and then there, of course, is Bethune-Cookman University. I have a constituent, and this is really what put this front of mind. I have a constituent who is a graduate of Ocoee High School, who's been living in Ocoee since she was in elementary school. And when she learned of this opportunity when she was in high school, she was excited to be able to participate, only to learn that because she is a freshman now at Bethune-Cookman University, she would not have this opportunity. So I figured if Florida is trying to right a wrong, let's be as inclusive and as expansive as we possibly can. And so with that, we're along with Senator Thompson, we're going to try to expand this piece of legislation to include our historically Black colleges and universities.
That's great. That's great. So do you think the fact that you're going to keep the scholarship money here in Florida, because I know last year you tried to expand it to almost any HBCU. So do you think it will have a better chance of passing keeping the money here?
We hope so. We hope so. We think that it's the right thing to do. I mean, and the fact that the initial piece of legislation passed and the legislature had an appetite and they were agreeable, we think that this small tweak would be okay. Each session there is a different culture, a different personality. So obviously, based on my colleagues not putting this on the agenda for committee last session, that perhaps that wasn't the right time, but we think this time is the right time. So I'm going to be working very hard in these next few committee weeks to lobby this bill so that the chairs of the committees that this bill would need to go through on the House side of things would understand the importance.
Okay, well, with the price of college, and university these days, every bit of scholarship money is helpful. So fingers crossed that that this passes. So, Senator, is there another bill that you'll be working on this session that you'd like to tell us about?
Well, I'm going to be working on a bill related to pedestrians. Florida, unfortunately, has the designation as one of the most dangerous states for pedestrians. And the bill that I'm going to be working on has to do with making sure that pedestrians also take responsibility for their own safety. Right now, most pedestrians believe that they have the right of way, which they do, but they need to come to an intersection and make sure that the motorist sees them. And we also want signage that will say, stop, look, be safe before you enter the intersection. So that's another tweak to something that we already have in law with regard to pedestrians, but I think it will go a long way to make people in the state of Florida much safer.
I agree. We actually covered something like that in our publication. So it's good to see some movement on that. Yeah, everybody's got to take responsibility for the crosswalk. Would this be in uncontrolled crosswalks only, or in all crosswalks?
It would be for the crosswalks that do not have electric signals, meaning traffic lights. Mm-hmm. So if it's a stoplight or a yield sign, it would not apply. But if there is no electric light, then that is when it would apply.
Okay, all right. Representative, is there another bill that you would like to talk about? I have one in mind, but if there's something that you would like to tell us about.
Sure. So I have a heart for the returning citizens community. It's something that I think that community really needs a voice and a champion, and to be reminded that they are not forgotten. Last session, I filed a bill on the returning citizens community, and it had to deal with housing and attempting to ensure that there was also an opportunity for the returning citizens to have housing, because we know that if the city and the county and the state and the nation is having an issue with affordability with housing, then we know the returning citizen community absolutely has that same concern. So I've made a vow, and kind of the brand of House District 40 is to always do something every session that has to do with the returning citizens community. So I didn't refile my bill as it relates to housing, but in talking, understand that bills come from the people. While I know the viewers here think that we as legislators are just brilliant people, bill ideas come from the people. We listen to the people, we listen to the concerns of the people, and I spend a lot of time talking to constituents and community groups and hearing what are their people saying, what is their community saying. So in talking with some of the organizations that deal with returning citizens and those citizens that, of course, have been incarcerated and are now released, I'm hearing that a concern is SNAP benefits. We understand that SNAP benefits is federal legislation that allows for benefits for groceries and supplemental nutrition. And how Florida interprets the dissemination of those resources is that anyone is eligible if they meet the right criteria in terms of how much money they make is eligible for SNAP benefits, but those that have been charged with a drug trafficking offense. So why this is problematic is this is not those, these are those that perhaps have been incarcerated and have done their time, and they want to be productive citizens. They perhaps need a little help getting back on their feet, and they're not able to apply for SNAP benefits. What really concerns me is those women that are working to get perhaps their children reunified with their children, and whatever the reason is why they have this trafficking offense or this conviction, they have paid their debt, they are out of incarceration. And I think it's interesting to me that the only crime that is carved out of the legislation is drug trafficking. So if you can think of all of the crimes that are on the books, and I'm not going to list them, but just think of any crime, that committing that crime and serving your time does not keep you from applying for SNAP benefits, but drug trafficking. So, and I thought that was of concern, especially those when we're talking about recidivism and we're talking about trying to keep people out of jail, especially after they've done their time, and trying to equip people and give them the best resources to be productive citizens. I thought that perhaps we need to change this in terms of SNAP benefits. So especially as it relates to women and mothers who perhaps are incarcerated or were incarcerated because of a crime that they committed, being maybe a drug trafficker for a bigger entity or something that really had nothing to do with them personally, but they just got caught up in a culture that they couldn't get out of, and now they're trying to get out of it after doing their time, and they can't because they don't have access to SNAP benefits. So this is something that I'm really passionate about. And so this is a priority of House District 40.
Okay, all right, that sounds good. I'm going to switch gears here for a moment. I want to talk about something that affects all Floridians, and that's property insurance. As we know, Florida has the highest rates in the country. I've read triple the national average. And I know that the legislature's been working on some reforms, but I don't know if they address the high premiums. And I'm uncertain if the reforms will help keep companies, insurers in the state. I actually lost my own, home insurance. And I know that that's a story that affects, multitudes of Floridians. I was informed by my mortgage lender, who sent me a letter and said, basically, by the way, you're no longer insured. And, if we buy insurance for you, it will be more expensive and cover less than if you can find insurance for yourself. So I was able to find insurance, and it was like, as happened for so many other Floridians, it was nearly double what I was paying before. So is there an appetite in the legislature for this next term to do something about the premiums and keeping insurers in the state, or luring back the ones that have left? My company vanished. No phone number, couldn't find a person, couldn't even ask them about anything. And they weren't even a fly-by-night company. This was a subsidiary of Progressive. So, and I just basically said, okay, I'm not special. It's happened to everybody. We're just going to roll with it. So, but this is happening, what do we do? And what can the legislature do? So
if I could jump in on this one, and then I guess Senator Thompson.
Everybody jump in.
Okay. Let me first say, and every time I'm asked about property insurance, I always say this just to remind the people that, while we are legislators, we're not immune from our own legislation, right? So while I hear you say that, your property insurance is an issue, my property insurance is an issue as well. I'm a working class family, and, while I am the legislator, I'm also a constituent, right? And so my husband holds me accountable. When I come back from Tallahassee, he asks a whole bunch of questions because it relates our own pocketbook and our own household, right? So one of the first things that he's a tough constituent. We talk about accountability. He's nothing to play with. But very interestingly, I had an idea, and this will not fix the property insurance issue as a whole. I think we need to hold these insurance companies more accountable. And I think we need to consider less and stop the bailing out of these insurance companies and perhaps put more money, cash money in Floridians' pockets. So the idea that I had, and I have had several conversations with the commissioner on insurance and talked with some other legislators, was to have a program where Floridians can apply for money that would help with their insurance rates that have just, sometimes in my case, doubled. And it appears as though while I was talking with the insurance commissioner and Representative Hart and some others about how we could kind of get this program off its feet, Representative Edmonds, a great colleague, has already filed a bill. So I'm really grateful for that. That has to do with kind of like a grant program. So what you would do is you would apply. You have to show proof that your insurance has gone up by X amount of dollars or by X percentage points, and you would apply to this grant program until the money is gone. And, you would have to show proof. And I believe how this bill is written, that if you were granted this money, it would go directly to your insurance company. So it wouldn't put money directly in your pocket, but would help offset. So I know he filed the bill. I would be 100% supportive of this because I think we need two things to happen at the same time. We need long-term solutions, but also we need short-term solutions to the issue, which is money in Floridians' pockets right now that will help offset. So again, the biggest issue is the bailout for these companies with no accountability. I think there was one company that we bailed out in that special session that's no longer even here. So, and we, on the House side of things, I'm not sure on the Senate, and maybe Senator Thompson can speak to this, we proposed an amendment that said that if we are going to bail out these insurance companies, they have to give us a guarantee that they're going to stay in the state of Florida. And if not, then they have to pay us the money back. And that amendment didn't fly, it didn't pass, but that would have been a really good amendment with some accountability and some teeth into it. So yeah, just know that I feel you. For all of those that are constituents on the line, I feel you, I hear you, I am in the same boat, and I will continue to lend my voice to this issue.
Senator Thompson?
One of the things that we were told here in Florida is that it was litigation that was driving up the premiums for insurance. And most of the litigation was related to the fact that insurance companies were not honoring the policies that people had purchased and paid premiums on for years. And out of desperation, a lot of the policyholders decided to take legal action. However, the litigation has gone down, but we've not seen the premiums go down. One of the things that happened in the session was that it made it much more difficult for an individual to sue the insurance company, that you could not get attorney's fees for the attorney who might represent you. Now, think about the fact that the insurance company has a whole staff of lawyers who will be representing that company, while the smaller individual person will not be able to get attorney's fees. So it set up a David versus Goliath kind of situation, which was totally unfair. But one of the things that we also did was to provide money for reinsurance, because insurance companies many times have to go to the marketplace to get funds if they have very high claims. And now the state of Florida is making money available that people can apply to the state. Insurance companies can apply to the state for reinsurance. And whenever I talk to my colleagues about the fact that I've seen nothing that lowers the premiums for my constituents, they tell me that, we need to be patient, that it's going to take time for the market to right itself, and that we're going to see lower premiums eventually. Well, I need something a little bit more definitive than eventually. And so I have asked, when is it that you project that we're going to be able to see lower premiums for Floridians? And I don't get a satisfactory answer. Now, insurance is one product, unlike anything else, that you must have if you're going to have a mortgage in the state of Florida. There's no choice. if you have a mortgage, you must have insurance. So insurance companies know this. And so I think rather than finger pointing and saying that it's the lawyers that are the problem or whatever, the insurance companies have to take some responsibility. And last session, we did pass an insurance accountability bill, doing some of the things that Representative Bracy Davis has already talked about. But I unfortunately cannot give you a quick answer for what has been a problem that has developed over years without any kind of attention and accountability on the state.
Do you think this is going to come up again in this next session?
I believe so, because the constituents are unhappy. And when I talk to people that I represent in my district, this is one of the major problems that they bring to my attention, just like you. They're looking at insurance premiums doubling, sometimes tripling, and there needs to be some attention paid to that at the state level.
Okay, all right, we'll leave it there. Okay, switching gears again. It's good to see, talking about current events, it's good to see legislative support for the Jewish community against anti-Semitism, especially in Florida, which is actually fourth in the nation for anti-Semitic activity, according to the Anti-Defamation League. Nationally, the ADL has said that since the Hamas attack on October 7th, anti-Semitic acts are up 388%. But I need to ask, where is the equal support for our Palestinian and Muslim constituents? Our area has a sizable Palestinian population and a sizable Muslim population. And while it's great to see such good support for the Jewish community, I've been talking quite a bit with Palestinian women and Muslim women, many of whom are not Arab at all. They come from Puerto Rico, they come from Pakistan, they come from India, they come from Switzerland. Anyone in a hijab is being asked to account for what's going on in Israel. So, my question is, where's the support for that community? I've seen polling that suggests that Democratic support for what's going on in Israel is declining. Quinnipiac poll showed recently that 60% of Democrats disapproved of Israel's response to the Hamas attack. An NPR Marist poll found that in September, 35% of Democrats said Israel's response was too much, but in October it went up to 56% said Israel's response was too much. So I have two questions. Support for our Muslim constituents and neighbors, and there was a vote in the legislature against a ceasefire that Representative Angie Nixon put out, and it was 104-2. So why vote against a ceasefire in Gaza, which we have now? We have a ceasefire for the exchange of hostages, and I have stuff in my newsfeed that's saying that the ceasefire might be extended to allow for additional exchanges. So let's talk about that. So whoever would like to jump in and go first.
Well, I did not vote on that legislation because I'm not in the House, and there was no companion in the Senate. What we did in the Senate was to pass legislation that provides funding to harden any campus, any ethnic group, any church, any religious organization that is under threat of violence. So we created funding for Jewish day schools, but this also would apply for people who want to apply for Muslims, for Palestinians, for African-American history museums, for example. So that legislation is in place. It did pass, and it is available for any ethnic group that is under threat of violence because of their ethnicity or their religion. But as I said, there was no companion to that piece of legislation offered in the Senate.
Okay. All right. Representative?
Yes. So a couple things. So I'd like to kind of echo what Senator Thompson talked about with HB 76. And that was the heartening. I think that's really important. I think hate is wrong. Let's just start there. Hate is wrong with any community. I would be remiss to not even just mention what happened in Jacksonville just a couple months ago as a hate crime, and what could have potentially happened at one of our historically Black colleges and universities. Hate is wrong. So I'm thankful for, I believe it's $45 million that was added as a result of this HB 76 bill. I'm grateful for that. And I'm grateful for all of the different organizations and nonprofits and churches and mosques and day schools and historically Black colleges and universities and all of the different organizations that will have an opportunity to take advantage of this to make their entity more secure and more safe, because hate is wrong, period. And that's a hard stop, period. It's wrong. And it's unfortunate and it's sad. It's sad that that's where we are, right now in 2023. And we're still talking about the viciousness of hating people because of who they are or who they worship or what they look like. It's sad that we are having those, it's sad that we've ever had to have those conversations, but it's really sad that we're having those conversations right now. As it relates to the resolution, I just want to clarify that Representative Angie Nixon, who was a colleague and a friend, what she proposed wasn't a bill, it was a resolution. And we understand that a resolution is just basically a letter to Congress. There was no action. It was just a position that she wanted the legislature to take, and it would go as a letter. And there wasn't necessarily teeth in that resolution as to what should or could happen, because we do understand that per the rules of the mandates of the Florida Constitution, our job is the state of Florida and not necessarily foreign policy and foreign affairs, right? So, and that does not mean that this issue is not important. And this issue is not something that we as Floridians and Americans should be tuned into. But as legislators, quite honestly, we don't deal with foreign policy, and that's per the Florida Constitution. So yeah, so it's important to clarify that this wasn't a legislative bill. And that the role, I don't know that the role of state representatives or state senators for that matter is to, because we couldn't call for a ceasefire. That is not something that we could do. While the intent behind the resolution, it acknowledged the humanitarian concerns for those affected in Gaza are deeply rooted. It in my opinion, could have gone further. It needed more of a balanced approach. It could have been a little bit more comprehensive in addressing the complexities and atrocities committed by the parties, both parties that are involved in the conflict. So I decided to not vote for that resolution, but that does not mean that I am dismissive of any issue. But I decided to not vote for that resolution just based on there were, I think, some other parts of that resolution that could have been added to ensure that our position on both sides and on both parties in this conflict were elevated and recognized.
And let me just add to that, the special session in the minds of a lot of people was political theater, that we were called into session to deal with things that state government, state legislators have no authority to do. And this was all part of helping the governor to look presidential. And so a lot of people who went to the special session just felt that we were there kind of spinning our wheels. But as I said before, I'm glad that out of the session, we did allocate money for institutions, for day schools, for synagogues, etc., that would allow them to harden their institutions, their buildings, their campuses. And so that was one positive that came out.
And can I say one other thing?
Yes, please.
I want to just say one other thing. I talk with a lot of constituents, and I have a district aide who speaks with a lot of constituents, and right now the concern in House District 40, when I talk with a lot of the constituents, is their day-to-day. It's having lack of resources and not enough money, and how their property is going up, their rent is going up, their car insurance is going up, our utilities. I bet everybody on this call can say that their utilities have gone up. And right. And so I want to make sure that, Senator Thompson talked about, this being political theater, and I think a lot of it was. And I want to make sure that we are not remiss, and while our heart goes out to what is happening in the Middle East, we are not remiss in dismissive of not focusing on Florida. And I think there was an opportunity with this special session to bring it back to Florida and to talk more about Florida and to deal with more of the issues that Floridians are going through. And I think while we did some good at this special session, there was still a missed opportunity to focus on Florida.
Okay. All right. You know what? Now is a really good time to look to the chat, because I see that we have some questions. Kat, what do we have? Why don't you go to the first question?
All right, so going from the very beginning, someone asked, I have noticed that Senator Jones has followed a bill 344 to effect changes made to the social studies curriculum last year. What are the chances that the changes will pass the 24th session?
I think I lost the visual here. Let me see if I can find it. And I'm not sure exactly what Senator Jones's bill actually does.
Does it have to do with the African American history standards? Is that what we're talking about here?
So while we're trying to get a little bit more context to the question, I'd like to answer that from a broader perspective. And I too, like Senator Thompson, I don't know the details of the bill. However, I know the makeup of the legislature. And I know that oftentimes it is a challenge when we are the minority party, in a super minority right now, as it relates to work that we try to get done. So we have to work 2, 3, 4, 5 times as hard to get legislation passed. The hardest part of getting legislation passed, and this is coming from someone along with Senator Thompson, we were able to be successful in getting some bills passed last year, is getting the bill agenda'd. That's the hardest part. Because they don't kill bills on the floor, or they don't kill bills, when you vote. They kill bills by not agendaing them. But just by, the chair will determine what gets to be heard. So while I don't know the details of the question, when you ask how hard it is or what's the likelihood, it has to do with the content of the bill, and it has to do with what committees it has to go through, and then it has to do with how the chair of those committees feel about that bill. And that oftentimes will determine the success of a bill. And that's a broad answer. That's not necessarily the specifics of that bill, but I can tell you that's the rule to how the legislature works right now with us in the super minority.
Okay, I have a little bit more context on the Senate Bill 344. and it does have to do with the standards, prohibiting specified instruction. Prohibiting specified instruction, state academic standards from indicating or implying that an enslaved person benefited from slavery or the enslavement experience in any way. So, all right.
The current administration has denied that the current standards imply that there was a benefit to slavery. They maintain that was something manufactured by the Biden-Harris administration, they were not at all involved in writing these standards. But that's the narrative that we hear, is that this is all contrived. So I would doubt. I would like to believe that bill would pass, but I would doubt that it will be placed on the agenda to be heard in committee or to be heard in chamber. I would be delighted if it were, but I have tried unsuccessfully for a couple of months now to meet with Education Commissioner Manny Diaz, and he's never available. And so I've asked, well, just give me some dates when you're open and I'll work around you. But I've not been successful in getting on his calendar so that I can present some alternatives to the standards that have been pushed out and that all 67 county school superintendents now have to implement in their school district.
Well, one idea that I heard you bring up at your town hall that I thought was absolutely brilliant was to start filing some lawsuits because Black students would be uncomfortable not seeing themselves in the curriculum, and they would be uncomfortable being made to feel that you listed a whole bunch of ways that they would be uncomfortable with not seeing themselves, made to feel, various ways, and basically flipping the statute around. And I thought that was absolutely brilliant, and I would like to see some more.
The law does say that students should not be made to feel emotional distress.
There you go.
And I think that if you are not included in the whole educational process, from the curriculum to the lesson plans to the day-to-day instruction, that would cause emotional distress. So I wanted to emphasize that African-American parents and their children are covered under the law to file litigation saying that they have felt emotional distress based on the law of the state of Florida. Because the reality is that the law says that you cannot discuss race in the classroom in a way that makes students feel uncomfortable. It does not say white students, but if you read between the lines, who are the students then that you don't want to make uncomfortable? Are African-American students not already uncomfortable because they cannot get an accurate reflection of their history in this country? So I'm still advocating for parents, looking for plaintiffs who will file this kind of legislation. And it takes a lot of backbone, takes a lot of courage to step forward to do that.
Sounds like class action to me. Okay, let's what's our next question, Kat?
So going back to some of the conversation earlier, someone wrote that in one instance, the only way I was able to have insurance pay was to get a lawyer and sue. I was out of my home for 2 years after a tree fell on it. What recourse will we have now?
Well, it's going to be much more difficult. As I mentioned earlier, laws were passed that made it very difficult for homeowners, for the people who pay the premiums, to sue the insurance company. Because if you know that you are not going to be able to get attorney's fees, you have to commit to paying those fees yourself. And attorneys know that they're not able to get attorney's fees up front. So they're not going to take cases on contingency. They're going to be very reluctant to do that. And so unfortunately, it made it very, very, very difficult to sue the insurance company. And the insurance company has a very powerful lobbyist. They are powerful entities, and they've made a lot of contributions to people who make these decisions. They've not made contributions to people like me who are opposed to what they've done here in the state of Florida.
Representative, did you want to add anything to that?
Only, and I'm gonna go on my usual soapbox for a minute, and it has to do with voting. And how does this relate? You know, there are legislators that voted for this. Senator Thompson hit on it because it was beneficial to them. It was beneficial to vote on this bailout for insurance companies. It was beneficial to vote on insurance companies and not having all the repercussions from attorneys. So I would just ask for constituents that are going to hear this to hold those legislators accountable. You know, when you talk about you were directly impacted and you were, you know, didn't have a place to live for 2 years, and then, you know, it made it harder for you to even get, you know, judicial intervention, and it was because of legislators that voted that way. Think about those things when it's time to vote. And when these legislators have town hall meetings that voted in a way that is totally contrary to your livelihood, hold them accountable. Ask those questions. Why did you vote this way? You know, ask those questions. I think that is extremely important. And it all goes back to, you know, if these people are voting on the floor against your interests, then you need to vote them out.
Yeah. 100%. You know, we get the government that we deserve. We get the government that we vote for. Absolutely. Okay. Kat, what's next? Couple of more, and then we'll wrap up.
All right. So someone asks, where do we stand on the ban on African American history? 2 of my children attend state-run universities. One of them minors in African American studies, and this field of study has been abolished at New College by the state.
I'm going to let Senator Thompson start with that one because, you know, I will give way to the expert.
Well, we know that New College is kind of a guinea pig, if you will. It's supposed to be remade in the image of Hillsdale College. And that is what a lot of this is being driven by. The prohibition against any state funding for programs that focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion. The prohibition against discussing race in the classroom in a way that makes students feel uncomfortable. The whole notion that vouchers for all, regardless of your income, is what we need to be doing in this state. It takes away from the public education system. That means the money has to come from somewhere. It's not an unlimited amount of money. So we've seen so many things that have happened in the state, and we know the intent is to make it very conservative with regard to what is taught, what we focus on, what we support. And as I said, I think that you've got to make sure that when it's time for you to make a decision, and this is true for people who don't vote. We just heard Representative Bracy Davis encouraging people to vote. Well, people who don't vote contribute to this situation. And we saw in 2022 with the re-election of the governor that people stayed home. People opted out of the process. And therefore, we have the administration that we have. And so I think we're going to see a lot more students who are going to opt out of our public institutions. And many of those students are going to end up going to HBCUs. I talked with the presidents of HBCUs not long ago. And they're gearing up now for an influx of students because those students are going to feel welcome. They're going to feel valued. They're going to be able to major in African American studies. And what we have to do is to make sure that the funding is there. If these students are going to choose HBCUs, we've got to make sure that the funding is there to support these students who are going to seek other alternatives. And that's a sad thing because we work so hard to make our higher educational institutions more inclusive. And this just takes us in the opposite and, in my opinion, the wrong direction.
I do just want to add that Sunny, the person who asked that question, did just say that his student is leaving the state to continue his studies.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a brain drain, and that's unfortunate.
And for the professors too.
Yes, yes.
And just an anecdotal comment, just because, you know, what's wrong with being uncomfortable when we know that oftentimes the people that we're studying, the stories that we're studying was in a place of uncomfortability. So, you know, when I think about my mother, who was the first African-American to integrate Gainesville High School, and to this day, she has a scar down in her head from when she was beat up. You know, she was uncomfortable. So it's okay if someone has to be uncomfortable if they're learning about her uncomfortability. And we can go on in Ocoee with the 1920 Ocoee massacre, when you had a whole community of people that were run out of their neighborhoods and their lands were stolen, and July Perry was lynched. You know, there was some uncomfortability there. So it's okay with people being uncomfortable and learning about it, because they're just learning about it in a book. These are people that actually endured some of these hardships. So, you know, just anecdotal information, but I think that when we talk about people being uncomfortable, sometimes we need to get comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Yeah, I'll just you know, echo that. I've been doing some research. I'm really trying to get Palestinians and other Muslims to speak with me, because I want to find out more about their, you know, how are they doing being here and watching what's happening over in the Middle East. So I've been spending time with the Muslim Women's Organization, and I'm Jewish. So sitting there listening to their stories, you know, they're not very complimentary, you know, to Israelis, to Jews. And, you know, I sit quietly and I'm listening. You know, it's not always a comfortable experience. So, you know, uncomfortable, but I'm learning an awful lot. And that's, you know, you hear things from a completely different perspective, and, you know, you learn from it, and that's fine by me. All right, let's take like one more question. Kat, pick a good one. Something we haven't covered.
Let's see. And okay,
But I
perfect.
think we have a whole bunch.
Yeah. I've got one right here. So it says several committee bills have been filed to roll back public school reporting and procedural requirements. Please comment on why you think these changes are being proposed after years of increased legislative restrictions on public education.
Public education in Florida it's a big deal. Okay.
Well, let me just say that the whole intent of what we see happening is to privatize public education in America, starting with us here in the state of Florida. And it's billionaires from outside of the state of Florida who are financing these kind of efforts. And so it's not necessarily a reality that people are supporting choice. They look at the amount of money that goes into the budget for education in Florida. And if you can divert those funds to private schools, voucher schools, religious schools, then you siphon off the money for public education. So the real intent here is to privatize education in the state of Florida. That's the bottom line.
Representative, anything you want to add?
I couldn't agree more. And I just wish we were having more conversations about public education. and, you know, making sure that our public schools are fully funded. And, you know, I have 2 schools in my district. One of them started this school year with 16 substitutes. You know, if, again, going back to the Florida Constitution, I've spent a lot of time with the Florida Constitution, and the role of the state legislature is to ensure that they fully fund public education. That is in the state constitution. That is our job. That is our purpose in terms of public education. So it disheartens me that, you know, last session we spent, you know, so much time on HB1 and so much time on this universal vouchers when we're not having a conversation about both the private and public school sector. We're having all this conversation and all this, you know, we're already seeing that, just as we warned that all of this money being funneled into the private school sector was going to have some money issues. And here we are, the money that we've put into the private school voucher sector now is almost gone. When I have teachers, public school teachers in my district that have 2nd and 3rd jobs because they can't afford to maintain life, they can't afford to pay their bills, so they're teaching by day, and then on the weekends they're working at Starbucks because they're trying to make ends meet. And I wish we could just have more conversations about doing what the Florida Constitution says we're supposed to do, and that is to ensure that we have a good public school education system, and then have some ancillary conversations about the private schools. And just again, just another little sidebar. It does also concern me that the private sector, while they're getting all this state money, are not being held to the same standards. It concerns me that you have private school teachers that get all of this state money at these these private schools, but then they don't have to have college degrees. They don't have to be credentialed. That is concerning, and especially some of these voucher schools, that the students go to these voucher schools and then they come back to the public education system, and then our public schools have to work twice as hard to get some of these schools back to where they need, some of these students back to where they need to be. So yeah, I know we're out of time, but I wish we could have conversations about the education system holistically.
Agreed. All right. Senator Thompson, thank you so much for being with us this afternoon. It is a true pleasure and honor, and I appreciate the time that you took. Representative Bracy Davis, thank you so much for being with us this afternoon. Again, what an honor, and you both have been so generous with your time. I'm so sorry that we did not get to everybody's question. I can see they're in the chat. I will take a look at them, and ladies, would you mind if I sent them to you so that you could take a look at them and, you know, perhaps, you know, respond at your leisure, whatever leisure you may have. I hate not being able to answer people's questions when they took the time to be here, but we are out of time. In fact, we ran a bit over, but this will be made available on our website and on our social media channels if you want to go back over it. And of course, I will send links to both of you. So
okay, and thank you for the invitation.
My pleasure.
I
So
echo that sentiment. Thank you for having me. Also, it's always an honor to be on with Senator Thompson. She's so knowledgeable, and I'm thankful for her mentorship, and thankful for this platform.
thank you, and thank you, Kat, for helping out today. It's been great, and thank you all. This has been wonderful. It was a pleasure to do this. All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.